this year, publishing 2 gives not just an indication of sort of gap between me and the lowest paid, but also we hope by publishing the median, some of a sense of actually where pay is more generally across the organisation, because at the lowest level a very small number of posts could otherwise quite significantly skew the position. So we're doing more than required here.
Chair, one technical question. This applies to staff on the main payroll and presumably not to those on certain consultancy contracts, or how do they fit in the process?
Would you like me to feel free?
Through you, Chairman, there are 2 aspects of transparency to this. Anybody on interim roles, we have undertaken, and if you look at published accounts, long-term assignments, the net cost of the taxpayer is no greater than that of the full-time assignment. Secondly, the above £500 rule means that every single payment is already published for anybody who isn't on our books.
I'm thinking the impact on the calculations around that, and whether they seem like it disproportionate influence on your figures. But it was a genuine technical question.
I can see one of the difficulties in actually doing that, given that the impact of holiday pay and non-items like that will be quite something to calculate.
It was a genuine question about how those things influence those 2 factors.
Leader, by saying I am the highest paid individual, I'm indicating that even those on long-term interim contracts can only be within the pay bands at this stage. Actually, short-term consultancy tends to be more expensive because it's highly technical, and if you look at the breakdown of where consultancies used in the authority, the biggest users remain by some distance planning, where, as members will be well aware, legal and technical advice and regeneration schemes are both expensive and hard to come by.
Anyone else? We have to agree to support. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next one, the reward structure.
This is my report, Leader, so I will begin. At the first meeting of this committee, we had a first discussion about pay and reward. This is one of the very few councils where the new requirement to have this committee is actually going to take a real decision, as opposed to a reflective decision based upon existing contracts about which there is not a huge amount that can be done in the short term. The issue here in non-technical terms is how does one bear down on the wage bill to ensure that costs do not exceed resources that are available, without doing so to the extent that every time the cost because you can't recruit because the pay is too low. And members asked us to come back this time, particularly noting at 1.3 with some very specific proposals around the post of 100,000. What we sought to do here is to identify that point which over time will ensure that we manage salaries, that is below the median, but not to such an effect that, given our current position, the position with the new structures, it simply applies to everybody at a future point. And the appendix sets out very clearly what this will mean. I believe it will deliver both short and, more importantly, long-term savings and clear control. I'm happy for Sarah to talk through any of the difficulties in detail.
If I could just make one point before you speak, Sarah, just draw the committee's attention to point 6, spot 1.6 on page 9, whereby this committee still retains control over any major increase in remuneration that will be offered. That's a very, very important point to respond in that Tuesday.
Thank you, Chairman. The proposal that we're putting before you tonight is to pitch the pay range for the senior posts at the midpoint between market median and low quartile. The process to do that we discussed at some length at the previous committee about the evaluate jobs And you can see that if you look on page 17 in the annex, you can see all of the jobs listed and their job size. This was evaluated using the Hay scheme. We then are able to match the job size against the market data. And the market data that we are pitching between is the median and lower quartile. And the chart there demonstrates that. As the Chairman has already said, the proposal is to continue to bear down the costs. So the median term, we will be expecting the pay range to fall down towards the lower quartile. The reason why we have two different, why we're going from midpoint now and then to move towards the lower quartile is to reflect that at this point, we need to have a balance of austerity and general pay restraint versus ensuring that we have relative level of stability at the senior level. The fact that we need to attract that and retain that talent within the council, and that where currently where London boroughs are actually paying, there is always a lag effect on that. So whilst we expect other London boroughs to be following suit, we can't be moving down that pay range too quickly. But one of the important points over and above we propose to have terms and conditions that are separate to the national negotiated terms and conditions for these senior posts. So the proposal is that these jobs would sit outside of national pay negotiations. There will be no link to Green Book or chief officers' terms and conditions except where it's a statutory requirement. The annual leave would be limited to 30 days plus bank holiday, and the sick pay would be restrained as well. So what we're doing is we're creating a modern relationship that is much more linked to the market, and with that we are bringing in that link to market pay as well. As has already been alluded, the Remuneration Committee then will be able to make proposals back as to what pay should be in the context of the market, and then potentially how that pay is distributed as well. I won't go over the detail of the design of the structure because I think we did that talked about that quite extensively last time, but I would stress that this structure that's been proposed tonight will deliver the cost savings required, and actually it will achieve a little bit more in the first year and ongoing years, and then as we drift pay down from the local it will deliver further savings on top of that. Thank you.
Leader, just to conclude, I would, and the Chief Executive would say this, I would draw members' attentions to paragraphs 6.22 and the table associated and 6.2.3, which indicate that the combination of the restructuring of posts and then the bearing down of pay collectively will actually exceed the initial target I presented to general functions for savings resulting from the work on the restructure, and I hope to be able to confirm a figure in excess of £600,000 from that restructuring in the next financial year, which is a very significant contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Just before I ask Councillor Moore to speak, I would just say that the residents will appreciate the savings in top pay. It is something that does come up on the doorstep, and it is something that does need to be dealt with. And I appreciate that also the terms and conditions are coming somewhat more back to what would be regarded as normal in the real world. I'm grateful for that work.
It's again, it's possibly technical, we're referring to 6.1.6, in market pay issues. I've been around council and actually around London where we were looking at enhancements, or the relic of enhancement when I was first councillor, of a period where, particularly in finance and IT, there were overage payments or whatever you've done. I just wanted to clarify that we see this as a two-way process, that actually while that is, if and when that can be justified, then there's an argument for it in this committee, but actually also that there's an opportunity where those pressures are no longer there, they would be reverting, actually, if we didn't need that additional uplift to retain skills.
Sorry, I didn't understand that point. Sorry, can you...
say, Councillor, is that are we going to hardwire in market supplements under that chapter?
Thank you very much for that translation.
The answer to that is no. And the critical issue here is, and I do feel like I'm maybe spending a bit too much time with HR people at the moment, but a question this committee, I would advise it, where my policy advisor on the paid service hat should be asking is that where there is market supplement being paid, what's the talent strategy and the retention strategy being put in place so that this is only an interim measure? And certainly the authorities had very good success in retaining social workers by having a scheme, a traineeship scheme. Likewise, middle management talent is supported by the graduate entry scheme that we're heavily supportive of, and those investments are actually what's required so that we are able to say to the committee, this is something that needs to be done for an interim period rather than a permanent measure.
I'm heartened by that because I think what we ended up with that relic were actually some very good qualities issues and equity issues, and so I just wanted to be quite clear that we weren't restrained to that system.
I think we can all be pleased actually that this does appear to be a much fairer scheme, and it is one that is thought out from start to finish and has not as yet got distorted. But I think we must be mindful of Councillor Moore's fear of distortion. It is a danger, and it is almost inherent in any scheme.
Certainly 15 years ago it was jobs for boys, and I mean that's the most respectful way.
That would be an equality issue.
Councillor Moore is right, and in a sense it takes us back to, so why choose the midpoint between medium and lower quartile? Because there's a danger by simply going for the lower quartile, that within a couple of years you have to make so many exceptions because you're paying well below market rate that the scheme has no organisational meaning, and then in terms of management and career development, you end up in exactly the sort of situation that Councillor Moore is quite right to identify.
Thank you. Two issues I'd like to raise. The first set is around pay protection. I understand the need to retain existing senior member staff and keep the organisation stable, to keep the knowledge, and all the rest. I understand that. I also read in the report that 16 potential cases where we could have pay protection on an average of £9,000, and that potentially is £144,000 worth of pay protection. I'm quite keen to make sure that we pay for the role and not the person, actually. And if that person has skills above the role, then perhaps they should go for a job elsewhere where they can apply those skills to get greater pay. That's what normally happens. So is there any reassurance officers can give me in terms of pay protection, and perhaps having a cap on it, or perhaps over time that those who are being paid in excess of the salary of the benchmark, over time that actually erodes away?
Through you, Chairman. The figures that you referred to in 6.2.3, that was at the start of the application process. So as people progress through that talent process, we will see that number just naturally decline. So that was a worst case scenario with the applicants at the outset. I think probably the thing I would say is that we need to be thinking about because pay has been relatively high within the council historically, plus we need to retain some of the talent. We do need to provide some form of pay protection, but probably what we need to do is to think about actually how long that should be in place and manage it in that way. So there's an end point to it rather than being open-ended. I think if we didn't have pay protection at all, I think we would risk losing particularly talented people who maybe just happen to be beneficiaries of a relatively generous pay scheme at that point in time. And I don't think that would be helpful. The other point I would make is that we would most definitely not protect any historic pay protection that they might bring with them. It would only be pay protection from their previous job.
Thank you. That's reassurance. Thank you. The second point, and my last one on this paper, is the last committee I asked for the difference between what would an entry-level successful candidates be earning in terms of a percentage of the competent level, acknowledging that they're not yet competent and also obviously got potential. I gathered in the report 9.7 talks about a 10% banding difference between the bandings, so does that relate the bandings of roles or the bandings of competency and entry level?
Through you, Chairman. That relates to when you look at the table on page 17, what you've got is that 10% or capped at £10,000. And the idea is that when you come in, then there will be two levels to progress. That will be managed, the progression through that will be managed on a performance basis against objectives meeting the requirements of the job. So it would be within the manager's gift to be making that assessment. It would not be automatic. In regard to I know that there was a discussion last time about 10%, how much money it is. What I can confirm is we actually went back and sought professional advice on that, and the advice that came back that it should be about 10%. However, when we applied that to the higher range, it became a very large sum, so we capped it at £10,000.
Thank you, Jim.
Following on from Council Thomas's first point, 4.6 talks about council paying range midpoint between medium and lower quartile. The next paragraph, 4.6, talks about reward mechanisms. 6.1.2 talks about pay protection. 6.1.5 talks about personal contracts but dependent on the employer's length of qualifying service. That's to do with annual leave and sick pay. 6.1.6 talks about market supplement if required. And so throughout the whole report, can we have your assurance that the senior officers won't end up earning more?
I can't actually give directly that assurance because there is one place where the job size is doubling, but I can assure you that the bill at every level in the organisation will be lower than that. It would not be acceptable to pay somebody who is running what's previously done by two directors exactly the same salary and hope that we get that person to stay. However, I can assure you that no post will be able to benchmark.
I can provide also an absolute assurance because where we pitch the pay point, that is below where we currently pay. So essentially, if you're doing the same size job, you will be paid less money from when this comes into force, assuming the committee accepts this tonight. And then the second point, some people may get paid more, but that's because they will be taking on a bigger job and have been promoted. But again, they will come in and work their way through those ranges. So, there's an expectation that if you go for a promotion, that there would be some sort of increase there. But if you're doing the same size job, you will receive less money.
And another point on this same subject, you indicated that the pay protection will probably be time limited. How long a time?
I think we need to build in some discretion on this because we need to see who comes through the talent mapping process and what the amount of pay protection is that might be required. Because if you have a particular individual who's going into a job, as I say, through historic issues, has received a generous salary, it may be that we need to finesse that. Now, clearly, we've got equalities issues built into that. We've got to be very mindful, but I think rather than having a set formula, I think we should allow ourselves a little bit of discretion.
This does lead a little bit into the next agenda item, in that the intention is that the January meeting does receive a pay and award report from myself and the AD for HR. I would suggest that one of the issues that would need to be considered on an annual basis would be at that interface between Councillor Moore's earlier question about market supplements and the issue about pay protection, which is another way of asking the question, is our current pay and reward strategy actually holding up out there in the marketplace, and is it fit for the organisation? So I would suggest that this is a matter that the committee could ask us to bring forward on an annual basis.
Suggestions, because we will obviously be looking at the use of pay of those very senior officers on a more regular basis than we've done here before. And I think that would cover the nitty-gritty there. Okay, so can we take the report as well? Thank you.
delay to agreement. There's an interesting question about what would happen if we didn't, particularly in the council, there wasn't restructuring, but we are still required to do this.
Sorry, before we just take that vote, how many posts are there at the moment? We bring this to?
Off the top of my head,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. Is this a substantial reduction?
Probably right.
We're thinking about 11 posts currently.
Thank you. So it is a reduction. Good. Okay. Can we vote on this item then, please? There's one. Do you need to vote on? Do you need to vote on all three or one spot three?
Spot for you, isn't it?
1.3. Can we vote on that, please? Those in favour? Thank you very much. Right. So we move on to item 8, the meeting schedule. Are we happy with that? Seems a sensible way for
Yeah, if I can enhance this agenda structure for us, keep this committee busy. Appendix A talks about what September and January meetings will be. I'm a bit disappointed really that it doesn't really sort of seem to be seeking member guidance and member attitude, member opinions. It sort of says officers to present a general overview of all matters, commission officers produce a draft policy. So it's all very much rubber stamping, very much, you know, but actually I'd like to see us how it sorts members' views on this. And in that regard, I did talk about the last meeting. The future of this committee should also be about the way that we incentivise our staff. And I referred to performance-related pay. Now, I think some members perhaps wanted to throw in a stick with what I was talking about there. I certainly wasn't talking about bonuses and all that sort of thing, although there are some councils that do that and rule officers quite well and officers do perform very well. But that's the matter for debate, I think, in the future. I'm certainly not willing to go anywhere near there at this stage. What I'm looking for is that when we have the uniform 1% pay rise, is it right and is it that all staff should automatically have the 1% pay rise? There are organisations throughout the country, most of the private sector organisations actually, the big ones, the size of Barnet, whereby only those who are performing will get that pay rise, and perhaps those who are not performing get part of the pay rise. And so you've got an overall pay rise pot, but how that's dispersed amongst the organisation, you know, thanks those staff for doing good work, and also, you know, says to other staff who actually help them to do work. And I think there's actually an element of fairness involved there amongst the staff. And so I would like to suggest that either at the September meeting or January meeting, whenever possible, that something is brought to this committee to look at that, because I do believe it's in the council to disperse that pay as we see fit. And I would like the option brought forward to this committee for us to look at that as a move to actually rewarding staff. And I'll just end by saying this: we've only recently introduced in this council proper one-to-one grading structure where people are graded amber, red, and green. And that's actually saying, you know, we set these objectives at the start of the year, and at the end of the year, did you meet them or did you not? And I think that's a good thing, obviously, to have. Staff need to know if they're being productive and where they are in the developments and all the rest of it. I think that's an excellent way forward. Very pleased to see that. But I think the next step is then, as I say, talking about performance in very much that annual review aspect. So I would like to suggest to the committee that we do have a look at that and perhaps make this brought to us in September. And that the September meeting isn't just about officers presenting to us overall matters, but actually us as well, trying to get control of pay. And the last comment is that our pay bill is actually our biggest resource. And we need to get value for money for that out of our pay bill actually. And so this area needs great scrutiny. Thank you.
If I can I just respond? First, this of course, the agenda is actually a matter for the chairman of the committee to decide. So I'm sure that as we develop, there will be items coming forward that we will be putting on rather than just being reactive. I would like a discussion of just what you suggested, but there will be other things and details. Also, the contracts will be very interesting to go through point by point as well. And we'll probably end up filling the meetings quite easily as a result of that.
I think in the local democracy, and as much as this committee having effect, it isn't quite the same thing, Chair. However, what I wanted to say was, actually, I don't feel that if you do have a 1% pay rise across the board, there is anything wrong with having different differentials, as it were, which is what you were saying, wasn't it? What I do feel is that a percentage pay rise was very unfair and the lower paid workers. And I would like to see and to consider that as part of the sort of review that you were talking about there.
So you Chair, just to confirm that it was our intention to bring to this committee a review, a sort of top to bottom review of our reward strategy across the council. So that was a piece of work that was in hand. Could I also ask the committee whether 2 meetings a year actually is sufficient? Because what I'm hearing is actually quite a lot of interest from members around these matters, and whether you would want to meet, for example, quarterly or 3 times or ad hoc. Some guidance would be very helpful.
I think probably September is probably the earliest that we can actually arrange.
Just, I mean, it picks up to some degree from what Councillor said, Harper's comment, but obviously in the context of the work of the committee. Just putting on the table, actually, if the One Barnet project proceeds and a significant number of staff are actually moving beyond the council, there is that question mark about both pay range, but actually the workload in the committee. And I just put that on the table at the moment because, you know, we're moving into an area where a number of unknowns.
Just to say, we still have, we still have staff to assess it today, so we should still, the frequency because obviously we will differ. I think we take what workload comes to September meeting and from there decide whether we need another committee meeting or not.
Leader, I think I need to flag that nationally, and an issue that will come before this committee and members will need to reflect on is actually pay awards, the 1 or 2% is not the critical influencer on our pay bill. Incremental drift, where won't you get appointed and then if you've been here for a year or 2 years you then move up the scale, is actually what drives increases in our pay bill. And if you follow the government press, it appears that that's where nationally employers want to focus some of their energies around instead of doing that. And I suspect that will be a conversation that this committee will need to have and explore, because it gets to the very heart of local government employment, how we might deal with that into the future. So I think it's the same conversation, but actually it's rather more focused than the 1 or 2%.
And it's also something that greater clarity will emerge over what other people are thinking of people can actually over the next few months. So again, it's something to settle on.
Considering that, I'm assuming by the time we get to the January meeting, actually we'll have a strong sense of what the council staff on the books, as it were, the spreads there, and exactly what that will look like and projecting forward in that context. Because you just say that intrinsically you've taken that top tranche of staff out of national pay commission, and therefore I'm assuming that actually incremental drift will not be an issue there. In the way you structure it, I'm not making a judgment, but in the way you structure it. And therefore the group of staff within that incremental drift operate will become critically small, I assume. As they're actually part of their organisation.
Would happen in any case. There being no, have I